those toxic patterns that couples can get stuck in, especially around communication.
Oh, yeah.
So we want to bring awareness to some of these patterns and how detrimental they actually are in our relationships, as well as offer practical ways to decrease the negative patterns and replace them with some new approaches that will have a positive impact on your marriage and on your relationship.
Awesome.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 79.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. We're so glad you're here. And thank you to so many listeners who are reaching out to give feedback or make suggestions for the show.
Yeah.
One listener recently left a review over on Apple Podcasts and said, "These episodes leave me feeling encouraged, taking away valuable tips and advice from each episode." Now, we are so grateful that we get to offer that encouragement. Awesome. And honestly, this is an encouragement back to us when we hear that. You know, we end up tackling a lot of discouraging topics here on the show because there's a lot of challenging dynamics when it comes to blended family life. Yeah. But we're always trying to do that in an encouraging way that brings hope, because there's hope for your marriage and your family. We really want you to know that.
Absolutely.
So anyway, thank you to everyone who affirms us that we're bringing you some encouragement. We're really grateful to be able to serve you. Now, if you haven't left a rating or a review over on Apple Podcasts, or really whatever platform you might be listening on that allows for ratings, would you just take a minute now to do that? We're really grateful to be able to hear back from you. And if you want to reach out to us to make a topic suggestion for the show or ask a question directly to us, you can do that at mikeandkimcoaching.com/share. We personally read every single submission that comes to us there, and we'll definitely reach out to you when we hear from you.
Yeah. All right, let's get to today's episode. And this week, we're continuing with our February focus on marriage. And we hope that everyone had a nice Valentine's Day. Now, one of the reasons why we decided to focus on marriage this month is because your relationship as a couple is the relational foundation of your home. When you're able to find that place of connection and unity in your marriage, many of the other challenging dynamics really start to improve. And as we've been discussing, a blended family marriage will come up against some unique challenges to making that a reality. So we need to be prepared and avoid being blindsided. We don't want you to get stuck in the challenging dynamics. We want you to be intentional and proactive in growing your relationship and taking positive steps to nurture and develop your marriage.
That's right.
Now, in our marriage, we were stuck for far too long, weren't we, honey? We struggled to connect, and we were running low on passion, intimacy, and commitment in our marriage. Finally, we decided to get to work and do what it would take to learn how to manage all the internal and all those external stressors of blended family dynamics.
For sure.
And eventually, we were able to reconnect and build a marriage that has lasted almost 20 years now.
Hey, one more month. We're almost there.
I know. It's unbelievable, And for many of the most recent years, we've actually experienced deeper levels of passion, intimacy, and commitment. And we want that for you too. Believe it or not, it is possible.
Yeah,
Don't give up. So if you missed the last two episodes, we encourage you to go back and listen to those, because 2 weeks ago, we uncovered the differences between a first family marriage and a blended family marriage, and how these distinct differences create a lot of the challenges you're probably already experiencing. And you need to be aware of these differences and really understand how they impact your marriage. And then last week, we talked about the importance of cultivating more passion, intimacy, and commitment, and tangible ways to increase those essential elements in your marriage, because we all want and need more of those things, right?
Those things sound great. I know. This week we're going to take the opposite approach, though, by focusing on a few things we want to avoid. Those toxic patterns that couples can get stuck in, especially around communication.
Oh, yeah.
So we want to bring awareness to some of these patterns and how detrimental they actually are in our relationships, as well as offer practical ways to decrease the negative patterns and replace them with some new approaches that will have a positive impact on your marriage and on your relationship.
Awesome.
Now, one thing that we've talked about this month as well is this new idea we're trying out called the Spark Jar over from the iMom website. And we'd love for you to check that out too. We're just finding it to be a lot of fun. But you know what? This last week, before we recorded this episode, it was a really, really busy week. And we have done absolutely nothing with our Spark Jar.
We didn't get to the Spark Jar.
No, but what's interesting is we were talking about this. We thought, this is a really common thing for us and for lots of couples we talk to, is we get this new idea, we get really excited about it, we think it's going to be great, and then one little thing gets in the way, like a busy week, and we're like, I guess that's not going to work.
Didn't do much for us.
And sometimes we kind of throw the whole thing out, throw the baby out with the bathwater. But we're gonna do that differently this time. We just said, well, what can we do to pivot? And we realized this upcoming week isn't nearly as busy as last week, and so we're saying, well. So we didn't do it last week. Big deal.
Yeah,
we're going to pivot. We're going to get back to it this week. We're going to enjoy it. And hopefully we'll have something to report next time we sit down to record an episode.
We're not going to get discouraged. We're going to carve out some time.
So there's a bigger lesson in that. You experience setbacks.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to pivot and keep going and not be discouraged. Just keep at it and keep at it. And so today we're going to talk about those discouraging things we want to avoid. And we actually want to pivot, do something different, and don't let the past hold us back or hold us down. All right, so let's dive into today's topic. Now, this comes from Dr. John Gottman and his research team. And maybe you're familiar with Dr. Gottman. He's a psychological researcher and a clinician who's done extensive work over the past 4 decades on divorce prediction and marital stability. He's got some incredible stuff out there. And he's developed some of these concepts that he's called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And his research clearly shows that when couples experience conflict, these 4 toxic styles of communication can actually give an accurate indication of where the marriages are headed, whether they're going to be successful or whether they're going to end in disaster.
Yeah.
Now, Gottman's research is pretty popular. We know that. So many of you might be thinking, the 4 horsemen, I've heard all this before. But before you just kind of tune us out or head off to something else, I want to encourage you to hang in there for the discussion, because you might discover some new insights around how all this applies specifically to blended family couples.
Yeah.
And there's some unique challenges that we experience as blended families, right?
Absolutely.
And that usually requires a unique set of solutions as well. So that's where we want to kind of have the lens focused on these 4 horsemen topics today through the blended family lens. Our hope today is to bring some awareness and give you some practical ways to start reversing the toxic communication patterns that might be happening when conflict hits. And you probably already realize that there will be conflict, right? We have to accept that, especially for those of us navigating blended family marriages.
Yeah.
The goal here is to learn how to handle conflict and show up really well in your relationship. When those tidal waves hit and you're experiencing a lot of stress and disagreement, we've got to learn how to show up well. So this is something we all need to understand and continually work to improve in our communication with each other. I mean, we're coming up on 20 years, like you just mentioned, and we're still working at how we communicate well together. Yeah. So none of us are immune.
And it is a skill that everyone can learn.
Absolutely. That's a great thing. All right, honey. Well, let's get started with the conversation.
The first horseman or communication style that will hinder your relationship is criticism. Here's what criticism might sound like. You never follow through with disciplining your kids. Or maybe it's, why can't you be more understanding of how I'm feeling? Or you're always caving in to what your ex wants. Now, one of the first things to notice in criticism is that it usually is riddled with what we call outlaw words. And there's a lot of outlaw words being used here, specifically never and always.
That's right. We want to outlaw never and always from our discussions when we're in disagreement.
Yeah, we really work at that, don't we, honey?
Yep.
We don't like the extremes or the absolutes. But usually these kinds of statements are made from a place of frustration. They aren't necessarily completely based in fact.
That's right.
It's highly unlikely that someone always or never does or doesn't do something. It's just simply not true. And sadly, when we use extremes, it tends to invalidate our partner. And it also negates any positive efforts that they have been making. Statements using always or never could leave your partner feeling defeated and unmotivated to continue changing.
That's right.
If they don't get credit for the positives, and if they're constantly being accused of always doing something negative or never getting it right, well, why keep trying?
Yeah,
Where's the
why bother?
motivation? So when we throw out these absolute statements, we're actually working against the process we're hoping to achieve by undermining our partner's progress and gaining confidence and competence. We're undercutting them.
Yeah, totally. And whether it's intentional or not, criticism feels like a personal attack on character. Often we take out our personal disappointment or our anger over a situation on our partner. And maybe it's unintentional, but the target becomes who they are as a person rather than focusing on the situation or the behavior. Criticism can often make your spouse feel that everything is their fault because you're essentially blaming them when things have become hard for you. The important thing here is to learn the difference between expressing a complaint and criticizing. Listen to the difference. Here's a complaint. I was frustrated when you didn't follow through with the kids. I thought we had agreed to hold them accountable, and I'm wondering what happened. Okay, that's a valid complaint.
Sure.
Here's a criticism. You never follow through with your agreements. Right? Usually it's punching, and it's harsh, and there's some outlaw words in there a lot of times.
Definitely. So Gottman's antidote to criticism is to use a gentle startup around your complaint, right? A complaint focuses on a specific behavior, but criticism attacks a person's character. The goal is to complain without blame by using a soft or gentle startup. And to do this, avoid saying you. That naturally assigns blame. Instead, talk about your own feelings and start with an I statement. Then respectfully and calmly express what you need from your partner in this situation. Now, you can do this without blame or criticism, which can help prevent the conversation from escalating into a full-blown argument, right?
Yeah.
So let's try a different example with this antidote. So gently express how you feel as you focus on your partner's behavior. I was feeling left out of the dinner conversation when you and your kids reminisced about your first family experience with your ex. Then express what you need. I really need to process my feelings. Can we take some time to connect tonight?
Wow.
Yeah. Now, if you've got our trapped teammate, stranded stranger dynamic down as common language between you, you might even say something like, dinner tonight left me feeling like a stranded stranger. I really need to process my thoughts around that. Can we connect later?
Man, that sounds so much better than a critical response. Yeah.
So now listen to a critical response in that example and notice how different it sounds. You and your kids are always so rude at dinner talking about stuff that doesn't include me. Why are you so selfish?
Yikes. Yeah. Man,
so different.
We've talked to each other like that so many times in the past, haven't we? Yeah. Think about, if you just listen to what Kim just said in that example of a critical response, think about how you would respond if you were on the receiving end of that, right? That blaming statement versus the gentle startup statement, expressing that feeling and then just a need, right? It's so important to pay attention to this. So Gottman states that if you find that you and your partner are critical of each other, don't just assume your relationship is doomed to fail. The problem with criticism is that when it becomes pervasive, it paves the way for the other, far deadlier horseman to follow. It makes the victim feel assaulted, rejected, and hurt, and often causes the perpetrator and the victim to fall into an escalating pattern where the first horseman reappears with greater and greater frequency and intensity, which eventually leads to the next horseman, which is contempt.
Yeah, that's the second horseman. Contempt goes far beyond criticism. While criticism attacks your partner's character, contempt assumes a position of moral superiority over them. Yeah. So here's what contempt sounds like. Well, as usual, you failed to work through the spring break schedule with your ex, so I'll be in limbo all week and left to make things work out somehow. No big surprise that she gets to call all the shots and you just roll over and take it. Could you be any more pathetic and wimpy?
Ouch.
Of course, that's delivered with an eye roll and a sigh of disgust.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I wish we could say we'd never experienced these kinds of discussions, but we really have, you know. When couples use contempt while communicating, it's truly mean.
It is.
Right? It might include blatant disrespect, mocking, sarcasm, ridicule, name-calling, mimicking, hostile humor. Some of us who think we use wit and humor in our conflict, actually it's hostile sometimes. Cynicism might be part of it, or even just using that demeaning body language, right? Like him ended that saying, you know, it's an eye roll and a big sigh of disgust, right?
Or maybe a door slam.
Yeah, yeah. And the partner on the receiving end is made to feel despised and worthless. You know, when we back up, that's probably not what we want our partners to feel. Contempt is destructive and it's defeating. And often the one who's using it is playing the martyr, finding every reason that they're right and their spouse is wrong.
Yeah.
This was a tough one. There was a season in our relationship where this was real for me. Like I had a lot of contempt for you and it came out. I know it came out in ways that I wish it never had. But it's a tough one.
It was pretty devastating.
I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I'm over it, honey.
No, you're not. That's okay. We still have to talk about it sometimes.
Well, let's talk about the antidote to contempt. And that is to build a culture of appreciation and respect in your relationship. And that's what you ended up doing, honey.
Yeah, finally.
Yeah, and there's a few ways to do this. One of Gottman's mottos is small things often. We love that. If you regularly express appreciation, gratitude, affection, and respect for your partner, you'll start to create a positive perspective in your relationship that acts as a buffer for negative feelings, right? The more positive you can store up and the more positive you can feel, the less likely that you're going to feel and express contempt towards your partner.
So it's really the perpetrator, the person who's feeling that contempt, actually refocusing their vision, their energy toward, well, wait a second, there's some things that are actually going right here.
Right. Yeah. And another way that Gottman describes this is with the 5-to-1 magic ratio of positive to negative interactions that a relationship must have to succeed. It's so important. If you have 5 or more positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction, then you're making regular deposits into your emotional bank account, which keeps the relationship in the green, keeps it floating.
That's right. Yeah. So let's look at that same issue that you talked about from a place of more appreciation and respect rather than contempt. Maybe instead of contemptuous language like you just said, we could try it something like this. Hey, I understand it's stressful when you have to communicate with your ex around scheduling issues, but I'm wondering how we could get some agreement with them around spring break that's coming up. I'd appreciate it if we could figure that out so that we can move forward with making some fun plans for activities with the kids.
Yeah.
Right. The antidote here works well because it starts off expressing some genuine understanding and even some affirmation toward our partner to say, hey, I know this is tough, right? We aren't making contemptuous statements around their lack of fortitude or taking a position of moral superiority or really judging them or making them feel judged. Instead, we're making a statement of appreciation, like understanding where they're at, and then ending that with a very specific and respectful request.
Absolutely. Now, here's an interesting piece of the research around contempt. According to Gottman and his team, couples that are contemptuous of each other are more likely to suffer from infectious illnesses like colds and flus and all kinds of things than other couples due to weakened immune systems.
Man. So this is physiologically impacting us. Yeah.
Contempt is fueled by long simmering negative thoughts about the partner. Yeah. So what he's discovered is that contempt is so toxic that it can actually have a negative impact on our overall health and well-being. He goes on to report this important finding. Contempt is the single greatest predictor of divorce. It must be eliminated.
Wow.
So this is one we really need to be avoiding. But as we noted before, ongoing interaction around the first horseman of criticism can easily morph into patterns of contempt. And so that's something we need to pay attention to, because it's really easy to use critical statements and those extremes of always and never when we're feeling frustrated, angry, or upset.
We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion. Yeah, and the thing is we're talking a lot about communication right now, but this whole thing of contempt, if you think that you're experiencing this personally, it's really a matter of the heart. That's what I've found.
Yeah.
I can't get that 5-to-1 ratio. I can't make those positive interactions and deposits with you when my heart is ruminating on the negative side or the frustrations that I feel. I know when I had to get over using this type of communication in our marriage, it was all about my heart changing and figuring out how I was going to stay focused on what you bring to our marriage and not what I felt like you weren't bringing.
Yeah. So are you saying it was a choice?
It was a big choice. Yeah, I had to make a choice. Yeah. Of how I thought about you, not just muscle through how I was going to talk to you. Those are two different things. It had to start with my heart.
Your mindset too.
Yeah. So if you are struggling with this whole contempt thing, I get it. And I'd be happy to help.
All right. So those are the first two horsemen, which kind of go hand in hand, criticism and contempt. Now let's move on to Gottman's third horseman, which is defensiveness.
Yeah, and it's important to note that defensiveness is typically a response to criticism, and that points to that compounding nature of these communication challenges that we're talking about. These horsemen can quickly build on each other if you're not careful.
Yeah.
The problem here is when we feel unjustly accused, we're naturally tempted to throw out excuses and play the innocent victim, so that our partner's going to back off and stop criticizing us, right? That's just kind of a natural human response. Here's what it might sound like. Your partner asks, hey, did you pick up Sadie's ballet shoes from her mom's house like you said you would? She needs those for class tomorrow. Now, the defensive response is, look, my schedule was so busy today. You know that things at work have been hectic. You had all day. Why didn't you just take care of it? See, defensiveness is defined as self-protection in the form of righteous indignation or innocent victimhood. The goal when we start getting defensive is to ward off a perceived attack and sort of divert the blame, kind of point at someone else or something else. In this example, the responder, the defensive responder, also attempts to reverse that blame and make it the problem of their partner. Like it's your fault, right? What are you blaming me for? It's your fault. Unfortunately, being defensive never helps to solve the problem at hand. And usually the conflict will continue to escalate without getting to any actual solution-based discussion.
Right.
So now we can't even solve our problem.
Yeah. So the antidote to defensiveness is pretty straightforward. Accept responsibility.
That's right. Own it.
Yeah, even if it's only for part of the issue. So here's how that would sound in this particular situation. Oh, I completely forgot to pick up Sadie's shoes. I should have asked you this morning if you'd be able to swing by there when I realized how packed my day would be. Let me call and see if my ex has time to drop him off before ballet class. So this non-defensive response expresses acceptance of responsibility, admission of fault, and understanding of your partner's perspective, as well as quickly focusing on problem solving. I mean, what a difference.
Yeah, that's huge, right? It's understandable why we tend to jump into defense mode in these moments when we're feeling stressed or attacked. However, we need to remember that defensiveness won't actually get you what you want, because defensiveness signals to your partner that their concerns don't matter. They end up feeling invalidated, unheard, and really dismissed. And that triggers more painful emotions, and it just adds fuel to the fire of conflict. But not only that, blaming your partner for something they aren't actually responsible for simply doesn't work out well at all, right? A defensive response will most often lead to escalation of the conflict, and it ups the ante so that conversations get more and more hostile. You'll end up going round and round and round, attacking, blaming, and triggering each other instead of moving toward an effective solution to the issue. And what we've noticed in our own relationship is that when we each choose to just own the things that we're responsible for and we don't get defensive, then the other partner quickly backs down and becomes a bit more open and kind of cooperative around discussing a solution to solve the problem. Taking responsibility actually decreases the criticism. It avoids contempt altogether, and it curbs defensiveness, which paves the way for healthy conflict resolution and much more unity.
Yeah, which is what we want. Okay, so let's tackle the fourth horseman, which is stonewalling. Now, stonewalling is usually a response to feeling overwhelmed or emotionally flooded. And it occurs when one partner withdraws from the conversation and no longer responds to their partner. They just shut down. They ignore. They suddenly act busy. They might revert to obsessive type behaviors. Anything that enables them to avoid or escape the conflict. And unfortunately, this can sometimes go on for days. It can be that classic silent treatment, or what we like to call the Cold War.
That's right.
And even though this is often a natural response to feeling overwhelmed, it's an indication that you're reluctant to engage with your partner, which also means that you're resistant to working through the issue. There's a danger zone here of leaving issues unresolved and festering, which leads to unhealthy patterns, ongoing resentment, and continued conflict. When you choose to stonewall your partner, you're shutting them out and ultimately damaging the connection in your relationship. And that makes it so much harder to repair later on.
And for some people, when they're compelled to stonewall their partner, they may not even be in a physiological state where they can rationally discuss the issue and resolve the conflict because they're feeling that pressure, that emotional pressure. The physiological effects of feeling overwhelmed or pressured is an increase in your heart rate, and it releases a stress hormone into your bloodstream. Because of this, Gottman and his team suggest that the antidote is to ask for a break so that you can do some physiological self-soothing rather than just resorting to that stonewalling. So it's a pretty simple approach, but you need to be aware of some things before you just start calling a break every time something gets uncomfortable, right? But here's an example of how this antidote might work. So your partner has just initiated a bit of a conflictive conversation. They might say something like, look, we've talked about this before, and I'm just so tired of reminding you about fill in the blank, whatever it is. It doesn't actually matter. Now, in the moment, you might be feeling emotionally flooded and really tempted to just shut down and kind of stiff arm, stonewalling your partner. But instead, what you want to do is choose a different response. It might sound something like this. Honey, listen, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I can see this is important to you. However, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now and I need to collect my thoughts so that we can have a more helpful conversation. Can you give me about 20 minutes and then we can talk all this over?
So this physiological self-soothing approach is really about giving yourself a short break so that your body can calm down. It should last at least 20 minutes, and it's crucial that during that time you avoid thoughts of righteous indignation like, I don't have to take this anymore, or innocent victimhood, why is he always picking on me? Or case building and preparing to let loose on your partner. Make sure to spend this time doing something that's going to help you slow down and soothe rather than dwelling on the conflict, right? So listen to some soothing music, read something, take a shower, exercise. The important thing is that whatever you do, make sure that it helps you to emotionally calm down.
That's right. Gottman's research reveals that when couples choose to physiologically self-soothe, their heart rates lower significantly, and they're able to continue their interaction with increased positivity and productivity. So after about 20 minutes or whatever time frame you need, once you're calm, you're no longer overwhelmed, and you're able to return to the conversation in a rational frame of mind, you want to re-engage with your spouse.
Right.
Now, this is not an avoidance strategy.
No.
Okay, don't fall into that. A self-soothing break is an antidote to stonewalling that should be used appropriately and lead to re-engagement, not be an attempt to kind of sweep the stuff under the rug. Okay, totally different.
And maybe you're realizing that you have a tendency to disengage or stonewall your partner for different reasons than just avoidance. Possibly it's to punish them or for self-pity, to shame yourself. Maybe you feel like you want to hide or you're even afraid of facing the conflict. If shutting down or stonewalling is your typical response when you run into conflict, then you've got to find a way to break this unhealthy pattern of escape. It's critical to your marriage for you to discover healthy ways to stay engaged in the process of working through issues with your spouse.
That's right.
Because if you don't, then it's likely that you're bottling up all your difficult emotions. And guess what? Eventually, you're going to end up exploding if you haven't already.
That's right.
Which will, of course, create even more conflict and disconnection with your partner. And that can be really damaging to your relationship. And honey, you shared how you really struggled with contempt and that this became a pattern in our relationship. For me, as you know, stonewalling is my go-to. I'm a classic avoider. I like to shut down and just pretend things are going to work out somehow. And it's taken me years to learn that stonewalling does not work. It doesn't help. It doesn't solve problems. It doesn't build connection. So we've experienced these things, and we have made it to the other side and developed some healthier ways to communicate. It's been much more effective.
I agree. I'm really proud of you. You've worked hard at it. There was a time in our marriage where something would hit and I'd be like, where'd she go? But now it's like, wow, she's still here. And that's awesome. That's been great for both of us.
When it comes to disagreement and conflict, you're either going to learn to talk it out or you're going to act it out. And we found that talking it out, even when it's painful and uncomfortable, always leads to better results because avoiding issues doesn't solve problems.
Absolutely. That's right. And if you're stuck here, we've been working with more and more couples lately, coaching them specifically around healthy communication. It's a great program that we have that only takes 7 sessions to complete, and it equips you with a simple, practical process to combat the 4 horsemen and a specific method for problem solving. It's quick to learn and really affordable. If you want that kind of support, we'll put a link in the show notes where you can schedule a free coaching call, and we'd be happy to share more about this with you and help you get started. Okay, so those are the 4 horsemen of the communication apocalypse that will rob you of the connection that you're really looking for and block you from effectively working through conflict and solving issues as a team. There's criticism, and remember, the antidote for criticism is to use that gentle startup as you voice a complaint that focuses on your partner's behavior without judging or criticizing their character.
The second horseman is contempt, and the antidote is to focus on your partner's positive attributes and build a culture of appreciation, gratitude, affection, and respect for your partner.
That's true. Third is defensiveness. And the antidote to that is to readily accept responsibility for what's yours rather than jumping right into defending yourself or blaming your partner.
Yeah. And finally, stonewalling. And the antidote around this is to take a short break to self-soothe if you're feeling overwhelmed. And remember, it's not about avoidance, but all about coming back to the issue in a calm and constructive manner.
All right. So maybe now you're asking, well, now what? Here's a really simple place to start. Take some time after you've listened to this to honestly evaluate where you are right now in the way that you handle conflict. Now, I'm not talking about evaluating your partner or not really even looking at you as a couple. I'm talking about focusing on yourself as an individual.
Right.
How are you personally showing up when disagreement pops up in your relationship? Which of the 4 horsemen are you most prone to? And what can you do this week to take a simple step toward the antidote for that behavior? Put some serious thought into that. And when you identify what you're committed to doing this week, I encourage you to share it with someone that you can trust who will support you in making progress. Let them know that you're really committed to making some improvements to the way that you're showing up in your relationship, and invite them into holding you accountable and encouraging you along the way. And like I said earlier, if you need some extra support, we're here to help, and we can coach you through a very simple, practical process to help you show up during conflict in a way that helps keep you connected as a couple and united in your problem solving. We would love to help you with that. Okay, so these are the things we want to have less of in a relationship, the things that we want to avoid, these 4 horsemen, and do more of the antidotes. And that will make a big difference in your marriage and increase your passion and your intimacy and your commitment.
Yes.
And we would love for you to experience that. Now, next week is going to be the final week in February, this month of love surrounding Valentine's Day. And we've got one more episode that you're not going to want to miss. It's going to be really fun. So make sure you join us back here next week. And for now, that makes this episode a wrap.
Until next time.